Over the past few days, we have been discussing the prospect of the New York Mets acquiring Shohei Ohtani. Today, we get down to brass tacks. How much money will Ohtani command on his next contract? Could we see him get over $500 million? We'll be discussing that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment matter more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Now, this is the conclusion of what I've dubbed Shohei Ohtani Week, the third part of what has been three-part Ohtani extravaganza. I do think it is pretty ironic or just interesting how the timing has coincided that I decided on Monday I'm going to start talking about Ohtani, and the first show came out Tuesday, and what we've seen since is just a plethora of Ohtani news and content that is put out there, but particularly by SNY, but other outlets as well. Steve Cohen reportedly, according to Andy Martino, has already informed the Upper Mets brass that they will be making that push for Ohtani next year and starting to get prepared for it. All of those things that I was speaking about on that first episode that we thought would happen are starting to be put in motion. Have already been in motion for a while because this is the most obvious story that you could have seen coming if you think about how the Mets are operating, who's owning the team, who's the GM of the team, and the opportunity that will present itself, as I discussed on Tuesday, where this is just not something that happens ever to get a chance to sign a player like Ohtani, and so it will be a massive story, and that is why we've been covering it on the show the last couple of days. Now, getting into the final layer of this, the money that Ohtani could command. I was trying to figure out what has he been worth the last few seasons, and the boardroom actually did a really good article on this, where what they did is they looked at how much money was earned by the top free agents last year. They then compared it to their 2021 performance to see how much approximately one win above replacement was worth for a starting pitcher. And they did the same thing for hitters. So through their analysis, they were able to figure out that one win above replacement was worth about $5.43 million. That's generally what the worth was. If you kind of line it up with some of the players that were signed, it's roughly what a lot of them got, and it does make sense to try to gauge market value. So if we take that number and we compute it into the F4 that Shohei Ohtani put up, you are looking at a pitcher over the last 2 years that has been worth in 2021 $16.3 million and in 2022 $30.4 million. Carlos Rodon just signed. He got $27 million at 30 years old. Ohtani will be 29 years old. So to think that he would get at least $27 million just based on the arm alone is realistic. And honestly, I think he'd push towards 30 if Garrett Cole was able to get $36 million. Ohtani, as a pitcher alone, probably could have gotten somewhere in that neighborhood, or could get. Obviously, the fact that he does both complicates everything. But let's look back here first before we try to gauge what the contract is going to be and just discuss how good of a pitcher he is, because something I haven't been able to do up to this point is really dive into the numbers on this guy. And man, has he been impressive. In 2021, he pitched to a 3.18 ERA across 23 starts, 130 and a third innings pitched. This was really his first full foray into starting pitching at the big league level. Had, a 10 start span as a rookie before getting Tommy John, and then was out for a couple years. So this was the beginning of him becoming who he now is, which is one of the best pitchers in baseball. He struck out 10.77 batters per nine, walked just over 3 batters per nine, an expected ERA of 3.32, an expected FIP of 3.55, and his F-WAR was 3. 2022, he improved across the board. A 2.33 ERA, made 28 starts, pitched 166 innings, 11.87 strikeouts per nine, only 2.39 walks per nine. So he added a strikeout more than per nine, and he almost cut his walk rate by a full run, about actually 0.65. So still, or not by a full run, excuse me, by a full walk. You look at the expected ERA, 2.68, expected FIP, 2.65, 5.6 F-WAR. Only Carlos Rodon had a better strikeout percentage among qualified pitchers. So those were the two best strikeout artists among starters last year. He has a 6-pitch arsenal. He's got a whiff percentage over 25% on every single pitch except for his fastball, and the whiff percentage there was 20%, which is still high. The fastball sits at 97 as well as his sinker. You look at a slider at 85 miles per hour, a splitter at 89, a cutter at 90, and a curveball at 77. So he can mix any speed. He can really, change up the dimensions of all of his pitches. So he can change, eye levels for hitters, go up, down, go north, south, east, west. He can do it all on the mound. His run value on his slider last year was minus 28. Now, run value is a stat that really measures the exact results. So if you threw a slider in a situation where there's 2 runners on, you had a runner on first and third with 1 out, and you induced a double play ball, well, that run value is going to be high added on because you saved a run that was sitting on third base. That is, the kind of short of what run value is. It's measuring the actual results that a pitch got throughout a season. His run value at minus 28 was the second best pitch in baseball to Dylan Cease's slider, which was at minus 36, I believe, but more volume there. If you look at the run value over 100 pitches, it was identical between Cease's slider as well as Ohtani's. Edwin Diaz's, when you're talking about relievers, was more valuable over 100 pitches. But among starters, you can make a case that Ohtani's slider was the best pitch in baseball among starters. That along with Cease's, and also you have Alcantara's changeup, if I'm not mistaken. I do know he had a pitch that's up there, and from my knowledge, that is his best offering. Now, throughout the season, Ohtani had a stretch of 6 consecutive double-digit strikeout performances. In 10 of his 28 starts, he struck out more than 10 batters. That is ridiculous. Over his final 20 starts, he pitched to a 1.92 ERA. I will at some point, actually it'll be more of a Just Baseball article and show that I'm going to be doing, but I'm going to be comparing Shohei Ohtani, the pitcher, and the hitter. And spoiler alert for anyone's going to consume that content in the coming weeks or months, whenever I get around to it, Ohtani's a better pitcher than a hitter at this point. What he did last year, putting up that 5.6 F-WAR, he is trending towards being the best starting pitcher in baseball, more than trending towards being the best hitter. There's a lot of really good hitters. What he does on the mound is even more special, but the fact that he adds that layer of being an incredible DH, that just takes the value of his contract and puts it through the moon. It also allows him to get a longer contract than other starting pitchers could. So I want to dive into both of those aspects in the next couple segments. Before we get into that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and we are really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America. That is FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. And new customers can join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All you have to do is sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spread to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Now, prior to last season, you would have said that Shohei Ohtani was a better hitter than a pitcher because he simply had more experience hitting than pitching at the big league level. We'd only seen snippets of what he could do as a pitcher, particularly during the 2021 season. But you look at his entire career now as a hitter, he's got 581 games played. He has hit 267, 354 on base, 532 slugging, a 137 WRC plus. That measures hitters based on a league average of 100, so 37% better than your league average hitter. The thing is, he's gotten even better over the last 2 years. He's hit 265, 364 on base, 554 slugging, 80 home runs, 195 RBIs, a 146 WRC plus. He is tied with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for the second most home runs in baseball over the last 2 seasons. They, as I said, have 80. Judge, of course, over 100 with the crazy year he just put up. But one of the best sluggers in baseball, you can make a case for him being a top 5 slugger in the game right now, while being a pitcher that is trending towards top 5. And I said there's a chance he could be the best pitcher in baseball as soon as next season. I really believe that is how good Shohei Ohtani is on the mound. And if he can do that and be the best pitcher in the game while hitting 40 home runs for you, that is so valuable. And so if you look, and we just focus on the bat for a second, that same article from the boardroom, they looked at the average of the top 25 position players, and it was similar to what pitchers had earned, $5,380,791.93. He was a 5 F4 guy in 2021, 3.8 F4 guy in 2022. So based on that number, the range for Shohei Ohtani would be $26.9 million, what he was worth in 2021, $20.4 million this past season. Combine the numbers, the pitching and the hitting. 2021, he was worth $46.2 million to the Angels. This past year, 2022, he was worth $50.8 million. So that's just what he was worth, though. That's not necessarily what he's going to get paid. Remember, Aaron Judge just got $40 million a season as a position player alone. Now, he gets to play great defense in the outfield, which Ohtani does not bring as a DH, but still, what he brings on the mound is more valuable than Judge's defense in center or right field. Garrett Cole, as I already mentioned, $36 million on his contract. So if he was simply a pitcher, I think the starting point would probably be close to there, right? It'd be close to saying, well, he's a 35, 36 million a year pitcher because of his age and how dynamic he can be with the strikeouts. Well, now you add the bat into play, and while I think that certainly does raise the average annual value north of 40 million for sure, potentially veering towards 50, the bigger thing is it could lengthen this contract where he gets that money that a normal pitcher could only get over a 7-year deal, and maybe it's a lot longer. I want to discuss what that contract looks like in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. So how astronomical does Shohei Ohtani's contract get? I'm just going to throw a number out there right now, and we'll see how people react to it. $550 million. That is where I'm setting the price tag for Shohei Ohtani, and I'm setting it over, wait for it, 12 years. Here's my thought process. Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, Carlos Correa before the medical issues. We saw some long deals get signed, Bryce Harper in the past. It's a way to lower the average annual value. If the starting point on total value of a contract is $500 million, and then you expect a bidding war to ensue, that's where I ended up at $550, and then you stretch it over 12 years to lower the average annual value, and suddenly you have a pitcher getting a 12-year contract because even if he blows out his arm, he still has the ability to provide value as a DH. The problem, though, if you're a team weighing that out, is if you're only getting 7 years of the pitcher and you feel like after that you're not going to get much from him, you have to think about paying 5 years at what he's worth now as a two-way player. Not to say he won't pitch at all, but if he's not effective, there's a better chance that Shohei Ohtani's bat can hold up for a decade than his arm, because it's an arm, and we know how that works with pitchers. So that's where, in a lot of ways, This is a super risky contract. I mean, it is as risky as it comes because you have to pay him for both, and that means that he could be looking at $50 million a season. Honestly, if you think about a pitcher of his caliber getting $36 million a season, you think of a hitter maybe getting $25 million on the open market. You combine it, he's worth over $60 million a season. Now, I don't think he gets quite there. I think 50 is maybe the cutoff on what we think he'll get per year. But if he gets $50 million over 10 years, that gets you to $500 million. I think that it stretches beyond that, and that's where I landed at the $550 over 12. But we really have no idea what this guy could get. If it was a 12-year contract, he would turn 40 in the middle of that last year. So July of whatever year that is, that's his birthday, he would become 40. You could pay for basically his age 29 through his age 39 seasons, which you'd be looking at. That's actually on an 11-year deal, excuse me. So on a 12-year deal, you're looking at him turning 41 in the final year. So I think that it basically comes down to the opportunity to sign him that makes you go so far all in on one player. But man, it's a gamble. It's a gamble that's worth it because the payout could be multiple championships. But the more you kind of contextualize it and think about what the numbers are and try to rationalize a payroll that, each season you'd be looking at $90 million, or maybe not 90, $80 million wrapped up in Lindor and Ohtani for the foreseeable future. It's a lot. And again, if you look at that 550 over 12 years, the AAV for luxury tax purposes would be over 45.8 million. So 45.8, Lindor 34.1, right there. That's how you get up to that $80 million. It's a lot of money. It is. But what you would have on your roster moving forward is arguably the best shortstop in baseball, potentially who could become the best pitcher, as well as a great DH. And if you're able to, along with those guys, keep Alonso around, keep McNeil around, again, your core would become Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Shohei Ohtani. You'd have the young guys in Francisco Alvarez and Brett Baty, who you hope can establish themselves. Also, obviously, the outside shot of the Vientos, but then again, Vientos becomes even more expendable if you have Ohtani DHing every day. And of course, you have Ronnie Mauricio, you have Alex Ramirez. You have other prospects that can factor in, Kevin Parada, Jet Williams. You would need your prospects to continue to come up, be effective, and hopefully sign team-friendly pre-arb extensions so that you could continue to build a core around what would be an extraordinarily expensive main piece in Ohtani. But to have your cleanup hitter potentially for the next 10 years and your ace, that's a premium that you have to really fork up a lot of money for. Seems like Steve Cohen's prepared to. He wants him. You have Billy Epler, who landed him once. Now let's see if he can land him again. And you'll see what the competition is. The Padres are in. The Dodgers are in. You assume the Yankees would be in. And then you just wonder what other mystery teams could pop up and feel like they are, willing to go all in on this player. The Giants also, I should mention. I mean, after striking out as much as they have, got to imagine they are ready to put all the bags on the table for Ohtani. It's going to be an incredible bidding war next year when we get to it. We'll just have to see how this season plays out before then and how this story can change based on how the Angels perform, if he gets dealt, how that team he gets dealt to performs. We'll see if he even reaches free agency or all of this is moot. Anyway, that's going to be all for this Shohei Ohtani week we've had. Tomorrow's show, I'm going to do something farm report related. Haven't quite decided yet what I'll be focusing in on the Mets farm system, but we will definitely be covering some prospects. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by Lindsey Crosby. Locked On MLB Prospects is where you want to go to stay up to date with the stars of tomorrow. You can follow Locked On MLB Prospects on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.